Anyway, listen, but before we do that, we got to inform ourselves. You know how I like to do it, Fowler Nation. First we inform, then we empower, then we get our voice back. So in the 3:30 hour, late in the midnight hour, we have to inform ourselves about what's at stake. So tonight, on Friday, my final show, I informed y'all. You had Randy Weingarten on just a couple minutes ago talking about what's happening at labor unions. More members, people are joining. So don't believe the fake news, like President Trump would say, the fake news media. People are joining because they realize they're under attack. Another group that's under attack is the LGBTQ community, especially those folks who are of color. That's people like me. And the person that's fighting that fight for us, he does it. He's legitimately tireless. He's fighting it all across the country, and we're happy to have him right here on the live line on Reality. Richard Fowler, the one and only, the executive director for the National Black Justice Coalition, and my good friend, David Johns. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Richard. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Happy Friday.
Happy Friday, and congratulations on a successful show run. Excited to see what you do with the free time you will now have.
Sleep. I can't be as I can't be as tireless as you. We'll see what happens. But no, that's been an absolutely fun ride. But I mean, you, like, when I say you're tireless, because I think the fight, I mean, the acronym, there's mad letters in it. There's the L, there's the G, there's the B, there's the T, there's the Q, there's the A if you're counting, there's a double A if you're really counting. But these and there's the I. See, we could if you're counting, we can go all the way to Z. But the point is that these are people. These are American people, and they are some of the most vulnerable, especially when you add color in front of that long acronym. And that's something that you fight for every day. And so tell me, I mean, what after this week, after knowing that they will likely have a far right justice to their 5-4 majority, what is at stake for black queer communities?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking the question, in particular because too often we don't acknowledge publicly the intersections, and in particular when we think about the policy consequences of political decisions, we don't think about those who have intersectional and overlapping oppression that they have to deal with as a result. And so I was already concerned, given the decision that the Supreme Court made around the Masterpiece Cake Shop case. For those who are unfamiliar, this is what was referred to as the gay cake case, where two men in Colorado went to purchase a cake, and the owner of the cake shop said that he was not going to make the cake because of his religious objections. And so the Supreme Court made a particular decision in this instance where they, one, did not simply uphold what Colorado had already done as a state, and that is to say that anyone operating a public business has to accommodate everybody without regard for race, ethnicity, sexual identity, gender, any of it. But made it possible for us to continue to exist in spaces where people are able to hide their bigotry, their racism, their white supremacy, their hatred behind the thin veil of religion. And so we should all be especially concerned, and there are a lot of advocates, including a lot of partners that the National Black Justice Coalition is honored to have, that are preparing for what will likely be a continued assault against those who are most vulnerable. Black and brown people, poor people, immigrant people, LGBTQIA+, as well as same gender-loving people, the bodies upon which companies and individuals, including Klan President, Randy was much more respectful than I'll be in terms of responding to what his administration is doing. I appreciate for how she shows up in the world in that regard. But we should all be on notice. And we should have been here, right? He is not doing anything now that he did not say he would do when he was running for president. And my hope is that two things will happen. One, that people will continue to be engaged or woke, to use the phrase that everybody's now on. Although James Baldwin talked about that quite some time ago. And in that regard, running for office, but also holding people accountable. The attention not only should be on the Supreme Court, but it should also be on the Senate as a space where horrible things could be made less horrible. while we're still existing in a space where that man occupies the Oval Office. But there's going to be a whole lot more work to be done.
So that's a good question. And so for folks who don't know, me and David are actually friends, so I know quite. So I do have a Senate question for you. I mean, Randy's tried to tackle it yesterday, but you worked in the Senate for many years, and is there? I mean, because everybody's trying to figure out like what tricks are left that Democrats can pull to hold out until the cavalry gets there, which is going to be us voting in November. Like, what are their tricks? I mean, can you put a hold in? I mean, or is it really like people are going to have to be in Reagan Airport blocking senators to go vote? Like, I'm trying to figure out how to prepare people for the battle.
Yeah, and I don't know that I would support that. Yeah, I would suggest that people do that as well. The short answer is no. Absent members on both sides of the aisle working together to filibuster or otherwise leverage the ability to speak on the floor and call attention to what will continue to happen to our country. And by that I mean the intentional, consistent, and concerted effort to dismantle and destroy the very institutions that have enabled our democracy to grow and to thrive. Unless that happens, we should all just expect for this administration to push someone who's going to push their agenda. And I think we also have, right, like, let's remember that history continues to be made in relationship to, or in regard to this administration for the first time ever with Betsy DeVos. We're talking about her as well. I spent a lot of time today being really frustrated with the fact that they pushed back a regulation that would have allowed students with disabilities to have the ability to leverage private rights of actions and other resources in order to be educated in our public schools. But the Senate's lack of confidence in her did not stop a woman who is woefully unqualified, who is the definition of the beneficiary of white privilege, to be responsible for public schools when she knows nothing about public education. And so I'm saying all that to level set and for us to be really clear about the dynamics that are at play in Washington generally and in the Senate more specifically.
I think, and listen, I think there's some truth to that, right? And I think that is why, the more so than ever, like, everybody's got to really be awoken to what's happening across our country. And not only that, but we've got to make sure that we're empowered, we're engaged, and we are out voting. And before we could do that, we've got to make sure we take 10 people with us to the polls. And it's so important that we begin to exercise our civic muscle now more than ever. And so we're not waiting on the day before the midterms to figure out what's happening. Like, everybody needs to have a plan in place and making sure they're going, especially in communities of color, because...
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And to have a plan before going to the polls, right? Like, we have to... The art of warfare, they have changed their tactics. And so it's not enough just for folks now to show up, prepared to vote, but to register to vote, to be clear about attacks against and strategies to block people from voting, especially in states where it really matters, including Georgia, where we have the ability to elect our first black governor, and Stacey Abrams, or in Florida, where my brother Andrew Gillum is doing amazing things and is poised to be a young governor of a very possibly progressive state. But we have to be prepared to be able to exercise our civic ability to vote, because that is also under attack. And so the hard thing about now, and this goes back to what you and Randy were talking about in terms of the attacks on poor people, is that we are having to fight on all fronts. And that is not going to change and or let up over the next couple of months.
And I think, and beyond that, it's like, you're right. The fight on all fronts is an argument that I like, and that it's true. But that is even more reason, as Randy said, for people to say, okay. And I think you're starting to see it, David. I got to tell you, we've talked to callers, Republican callers, who are like, listen, I'm a Republican, but I know what I've got to do. And I know that I've got to stand up, because this is less about being Republican. This is less about being Democrat. This is about my neighbor and my neighbor and my neighbor. We all look different. We all come from different walks of life. But America's democracy is literally teetering on the edge. And if we as a people don't do anything, we're in trouble.
Yeah, no, I would. For me, we have passed the tipping point. We have stepped off of the precipice.
Come on. You got to have a little hope in there, David.
No, I mean, the hope is that that more people would be honest and aware of where we are and do the work required to move through this, right? So this for me is the point where we remember that it is white people, in particular white women, that allowed for this to happen, right? And they will have to continue to have these epiphanies and realize why, while they made decisions, sometimes thinking that they wouldn't be affected, that they are. It's not just about the neighbors and the others. To go back to the conversation you and Randy were having, but but foundationally, it's about our country and attacks against democracy. And until people are pissed off and agitated enough, and in particular, I'm talking about privileged people, people who have white privilege or financial privilege or other types of privileges, until they're pissed off and otherwise move to action as a result of everything that's going on, very little will change. I'll say that.
Listen, I'm a little more hopeful than you, but don't worry. Dave is coming back for the next, because I want to talk about National HIV/AIDS Testing Day, which happened this week, and some of the work that the NBJC is doing. So he's going to stick with us for just a couple more minutes to tell us about some of the work, because we could talk all day about the politics, but I want to talk about the work that you guys are doing to push America and push the rights of LGBTQ folks forward. So we're talking to him after the break. Y'all don't go anywhere. Right back. Serious Progress presents Channel 127, Reality, Richard Fowler. Join the conversation. 1-866-99-SIRIUS. We'll be right back.
Progress presents on SiriusXM Progress 127.
Hey! It's Friday, people. It's your boy Richard Fowler coming back on Progress Presents Reality with Richard Fowler. On the live line joining us, the one, the only, the Executive Director for the National Black Justice Coalition, David Johns, on the show. And listen, so this is sort of my constituency group. So he would be the advocate for people like me, I guess would be the right word. And I think there's a lot at stake, because I'm one of these people that I believe in order for us to fight for ultimate freedom, we have to first free ourselves. And one thing that NBJC works on is helping LGBTQ folks of color in that battle. And part of that battle is, one, us coming together as a community and fighting back against the rolling back of rights. But it's also about our own health and understanding what's at stake for us as Black, gay, lesbian, transgendered, asexual individuals. So, and it's part of the work. Can you talk about some of the work that you guys are doing on that front of things?
Yeah, happy to do that. So anybody who knows me knows that I'm very passionate about Black people. I'm honored to have spent almost 5 years working in the administration of still my president, Barack Hussein Obama, leading an initiative focused on educational excellence for African Americans. So the work that I do now with the National Black Justice Coalition is because I believe in Black people, and really that none of us are going to be free until all of us are free. And so particularly with regard to health and wellness, we do a lot of work to increase awareness around and access to prevention surrounding and support for individuals living with HIV. I say that because it's important for us to know that in addition to gay, bisexual, same-gender loving, men who have sex with men, that's a clinical term that the CDC uses, Black women, Black cisgendered heterosexual women, as well as trans individuals are disproportionately affected by HIV. And that has been the case since the epidemic was introduced in the late 80s. And it doesn't have to be. Still to this day, Black and brown people are dying at disproportionate rates, while the rates of HIV affection and affect have gone down for white people. And so we work to host events. This week was National HIV Testing Awareness Week on Wednesday. So we partnered with Angela Yee and Justice for Life in Brooklyn to host a testing event where individuals in a community that is less likely to be provided with resources or otherwise supported and having conversations about HIV prevention, treatment, and support. We tried to change that. And I was also able to talk about all of this and the importance of it on the Breakfast Club. And so we try to show up in non-traditional ways, in Black spaces in particular, to highlight the tools and resources and strategies that we have seen and believe can help Black people get free.
And I think that's such a good point. And I think it's so important, folks, that because in a lot of places, like here in the District of Columbia, the resources are there, and it's making sure that folks know the resources are there. And then for the places that there aren't resources, then we can have a fight for those resources. But in New York, in DC, in Atlanta, a lot of times the resources are there and people just don't know how to get access to them. So I'm happy that you guys are out there doing this work and saying, hey, listen, at minimum, get to know your status and make sure you get the treatment. But also, what happens after, if your status comes back, it doesn't come back it comes back positive, then what happens then? And so the work that you guys do is so instrumental. Now, how can folks help? Because I think what we've realized here is that we're all in this together. And so how can folks be of help to MBJC and the folks that you guys advocate for?
Yeah, I appreciate that. One, in terms of the work around HIV and health and wellness, we're supported by the Center for Disease Control and a program called PACT, where they provide resources for us to be able to raise awareness. So if you are in a community or attached to an organization that would like to do more to ensure that people are getting tested, are connected to high-quality and affordable health care, and otherwise can get healthy, happy, and whole, visit our website, nbjc.org, and let us know. There's also a widget on our website. If you put in your zip code, you can find a space in your community that will provide testing for free. So everyone should get tested. Everyone should know their status. If you are not HIV positive, you should contemplate using resources like PrEP and PEP pills that you can take as a part of a health and wellness regimen to reduce the ability of or the likelihood of HIV infection. If you are HIV positive, getting access to care, consistent care, communities of support, and ensuring your viral load is suppressed such that you can't transmit the virus is also really important. And collectively, we can all work better together to reduce stigma and shame for so many Black and brown people. It's not necessarily the disease that kills, but the silence and the shame that surrounds it. And then beyond that, really acknowledging that as long as there have been Black people, there have been Black LGBTQIA+, same gender loving people. It's critically important. Finding opportunities to talk about us and how we show up is helpful as well.
I love it. We appreciate you being on the show. Check him out on Twitter or Instagram, Mr. David Johns, at Mr. David Johns. We appreciate you being here. We know it's Friday night, so we appreciate you, sir, and thanks for all the work that you do for our community.
Happy to be here. Thank you, Richard. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you. We'll be right back after this break. A new hour. We're talking to Malcolm Nance about Russia, the Russia investigation, and what's up with our democracy. Malcolm Nance knows it all, people, and he's going to inform you. And then in the third hour, after the Trump serum, we're going to empower you. We're going to take you up. We'll be right back after this break. Don't go anywhere.